Okay, so by way of a bit of an introduction, this is not the time to do a full biography on the Rambam, but suffice it to say the following. There are scholars throughout the ages who are very famous, and they're famous because they've accomplished in one field or another, right? You have one who's excelled in Jewish law, and someone else has excelled in Jewish philosophy, and somebody else has excelled in Jewish mysticism, and somebody else has excelled. Even there are many scholars who are famous for dedicating many years or their entire life to one area within Jewish law, and they wrote a work, extensive work, let's say the laws of Shabbos or the laws of kosher, and that's how they've made their mark on Jewish history. It's rare, but there are times when you have a scholar of such magnitude that covers every single area of Jewish scholarship. The Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, was one like that. The Rebbe was like that, and it's also like these people. The Rambam is another one like this on a huge level. And also just by looking at the sheer amount of content they produced, there's so much that have emerged from these people that you wonder when they had time to study and research the stuff they're producing, just from the sheer magnitude of content. And the Rambam was one such scholar, just in the magnitude, the amount of content, and the vast swaths and areas of Jewish thoughts that he covered, and beyond Jewish thought also, medicine and philosophy. The scope is huge. It's like one in I don't know how many generations that comes around that can boast that kind of production of content on such a mass scale. Another thing is that you have sometimes scholars who prove themselves in terms of advancing scholarship on its academic level. And then you have other scholars who are more well known for their capacity to, I don't want to say reduce, but to kind of condense and simplify ideas in a way that the masses can digest it. That's another area of scholarship. Rashi, for example, his genius is that he takes the complexities of Rashi's commentary and simplifies it, that even the simple person who's learning Chumash can read Rashi's commentary and understand it. Rambam was one such scholar who did both. Advanced scholarship on the academic level and on the area of being able to make it accessible to the masses. This latter area was probably what he spent most of it, I can't say for sure, but it would seem to me that most of the time was dedicated to that, to being able to make Torah content available to the masses, and less in advancing the academic part of it. You see this, for example, in Rambam's book of Jewish law, which is it's the only, we're not learning the Rambam's book of Jewish law, but that in and of itself is just a study to understand the comparativeness of Rambam's code of Jewish law to any other code of Jewish law. It covers more areas of Jewish law than any other book before it and after it. And it's the first one to systemize it in sections, chapters, verses, books in simple, clear Hebrew, so that even the layman can read it and understand it. And there are translations available in English today, and you can read it and understand it. You don't have to be a Talmudic scholar. And that's really what the Rambam labored over, is being able to, synthesize Jewish thought in a way that even one who's uninitiated, uneducated, or at least not a scholar, can enjoy. And he was actually criticized for that. Many felt that Jewish scholarship should be left for the scholars. And here the Rambam is making it available to the masses. In that area, in these two areas, let's say the academic advancement versus the advancement of making Judaism accessible to the wider audience, you can put into these two categories the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, and this work, the Shemona Perokim. As I mentioned in the promo, I don't know if you saw it, the Shemona Perokim, this 8 chapters we're going to be studying now, is part of his commentary on the Mishnah. And his commentary on the Mishnah, as I mentioned, is written in Arabic for the masses, for the public, even one who does not know, where there's a language barrier if you want to study Talmud on his own because there's no Hebrew or because of the complexities of the language. He made it in a simple, lucid Arabic, and as it's translated into Hebrew, it retains its lucid fashion. The translators of the Rambam in and of itself is a whole study. Shmuel ben Ibn Tibbon, and then his son, Shimon ibn Tibbon, who were famous translators, and they met the Rambam's son. That's a story in its own right. But the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah was meant to bring the complexities of the Talmud and simplify it so that anybody can read it in a lucid way and understand the gist of what the Mishnah means with its Talmudic commentary. Now, specifically to these 8 chapters, which are introduction to the Pirkay Avot, to the ethics of our fathers, and the ethics of our fathers, Pirkay Avot, are moral, ethical, borderline philosophical guide, rather than most of Talmud or most of Mishnah, which is legal. So in that sense, we can compare the Shemona Perokim, the 8 chapters, the introduction to the ethics of our fathers, which we're looking at now, and we can compare that to the Moreh Nevuchim, to the Guide to the Perplexed. The Guide to the Perplexed was written, as he writes in his introduction to that book, specifically for the philosopher. He describes there who the complex person is, and it's a common, I think, mistake where they assume the Rambam is talking as a guide to the perplexed. Well, I'm perplexed because I don't know much. It's actually the reverse. The Rambam describes who this complex person is. It's somebody who knows all of Torah, knows all of Greek philosophy, and he's complex between the two of them. And now the Rambam is going to sort it out for him. So the Guide to the Perplexed is actually written for a philosopher, expects you to know lots of Torah before you open it, expects you to know lots of Greek philosophy before you open it, and it's very difficult to understand to the uninitiated. Even to a scholar would require in-depth and real study to really fully understand and grasp what's going on there. Whereas the Shemona Perokim, these 8 chapters, are also philosophical work, but they were written in such a way that it was meant for public mass consumption. That's what it's meant for. So it's kind of like that's why I wrote it. It's like the Rambam's guide for the guide to moral character. The Rambam's guide to moral building moral character. Everybody needs to build a moral character. And the Rambam lays out the manner in which he feels you should do this, and what are your goals and what are you working towards as you develop as a human being and as a Jew in particular. So that's kind of the context of where the Shemona Perokim comes in. It's pretty amazing that he wrote this stuff in Arabic, as I mentioned, starting at the age of 23. I think it took him a few years to finish it, but he basically wrote it while he was on the run. While he was on the run, running away from the Almohads who invaded Spain. He was running away, he went through Morocco and Israel, then eventually to Egypt. And while he's running away, he's writing his commentary on the Mishnah, along with other deep, complex halachic works, some of which we don't have today. And all along the way, if I'm not mistaken, that's where he studied medicine too, while he's running away. I mean, this is like a mind of, it's mind-blowing just to think about what this mind was able to produce. Okay, so let's start with that. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see the text. All right, can we see it here? You nod your head, you can see it, yeah? Okay, so this is his introduction to his introduction. The 8 chapters, the Shemona Perokim, is an introduction to the ethics of our fathers, and here's a few paragraph introduction to that 8 chapters. We already explained at the opening of this work. We explained the reason for why the author of the Mishnah puts this chapter, this section, Ethics of Our Fathers, why he put that at this juncture. So what he's referring to is his lengthy and thorough introduction to his commentary to the Mishnah. His introduction to his commentary to the Mishnah is essentially an introduction to Talmud, period. It helps you understand how Talmud works, how it operates, why it operates the way it does, how the Mishnah came about, where it came from. It's an independent work in and of itself, the introduction to his commentary to the Mishnah. And there he goes through each tractate and explains a synopsis of what the tractate addresses and why it's positioned where it is. Now, the Mishnah itself is structured, has 6 orders. Zman Nokat, so it's Zroyim Moed Noshim, Nezikin, Dusha Tara, Kachim Tara. And this tractate, Avos, comes at the end of Seder Nezikin. Seder Nezikin is the order of damages. The order of damages is a whole section of the Mishnah, which discusses the laws of monetary issues, disputes of claim, buying, selling, borrowing, lending, and any other monetary human interaction. The very last tractate of this order, the order of Nezikin of damages, is tractate Avos. So in his introduction to the Mishnah, where he goes through the order of the Mishnah and explains why each tractate falls where it does, there he gives 2 reasons for why Avot appears at the end of tractate Nezikin, end of tractate damages. Number 1 is because a judge who presides in a court, his primary occupation is going to be dealing with monetary issues, Nezikin. And therefore, to validate the judge's position, the Mishnah puts Avot at the end, because Avot, in addition to telling us moral and ethical values, if you look carefully at the authors of those saying these moral ethical values throughout the tractate Avot, you'll see that it constantly says, he received from him, who received from him, who received from him. So embedded within the Pirkay Avot is kind of a validation to the tradition. And therefore, when you look at the judge who renders judgment in your dispute with whoever it is, you can remember that he received this tradition of how to be a judge from his teacher, who received from his teacher, received from his teacher, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, kind of validating the judge. That's the first reason. The second reason the Rambam says is because the tractate Avos, which deals with moral and ethical issues, are more important for leaders than they are for the layperson. A layperson who lacks in moral character has damaged himself. But a judge, a leader who has to preside over disputes of monetary issues, who lacks in moral character, the consequence of that is not just for himself, but for the masses. And therefore, as a warning to the judge, the author of the Mishnah, the compiler of the Mishnah, Behuda Hanasi, places Pirkay Avot here to remind the judge, who just finished studying all the laws of damages and how he's going to delineate whatever case comes before him, to remember to keep his moral character, humility, and all the rest of the stuff discussed in Pirkay Avot. So that's what he's referring to here. And he continues, a number of times we've addressed the importance of this tractate Avos. We also talked about the virtues of what this tractate holds. We've also promised that we're going to spend some time explaining it at some length, because it is, but even though it seems very easy to understand a lot of ethics of our fathers, you can read it, translate it, and it's finished, you understand it. But to actually do that which it says to do, is not easy. In other words, Tractate of our Fathers, for example, talks a lot about humility. So a person can read the text and it says a person must be humble. Okay, I get it, the person has to be humble. The cognitive understanding of it is very easy. But to actually implement that humility is a whole other story. And therefore, says the Rambam, that's reason number one why I've chosen to elaborate on this tractate more than others, in giving it this 8-chapter long introduction, because even though it's easy to understand logically, it's sometimes much more difficult to implement, and therefore it requires more of our effort. Likewise, some of it actually is somewhat cryptic and requires explanation. And along with that, it brings great virtue and true success, and therefore requires our explanation, those passages that are cryptic. Therefore, I see it fit to elaborate on this discussion. Our sage says, while one who wants to be pious, should do that which it states in the tractate Ethics of Our Fathers. This is in the Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara there says that one who wants to be pious, he should study and follow the ordinance prescribed in Ethics of Our Fathers. And therefore, continues the Rambam, we have no virtue greater than piety, other than prophecy. In the Rambam's hierarchy of virtues, top is prophecy, just under it is Chassidus, piety. Not only that, but piety is what leads to prophecy. Like we've said, our sages have said, Chassidus mevia l'deruch hakodesh. Piety brings to the spirit of heaven, to Holy Spirit, to prophecy. So he knows bar the mevreim. Therefore, what emerges from this is to follow the moral and ethical instruction of this tractate. Brings to prophecy, and therefore, it further highlights the importance of elaborating and understanding and trying to implement the teachings of Pirkay Avot. And therefore, I'm going to spend the time to explain the truth of this matter, because it incorporates within it a vast majority of character building. Before I saw it fit that before I begin to explain each passage as we go through the chapter of Pirkay Avot, a person must know and understand certain things by way of introduction, and therefore I've decided to dedicate a number of chapters to explaining these principles before we get into the actual tractate of Avos. And these 8 chapters will serve as a key, as like principles from which he'll be able to understand my commentary as I go along in Tractate Avos. No. The things I'm about to tell you in these following 8 chapters. And that which I'm going to explain in my commentary on the Mishnah. These are not things of my own invention. And they're not explanations that I've come up with. They are collected from the works of our sages in the Midrash and the Talmud and the rest of their works. And I've also incorporated works of the philosophers. This is the Rambam keeping in line with his way of teaching, where he incorporates secular philosophy as well. The ancient philosophers, referring to the Greek philosophers, and the contemporary philosophers of his day. Probably mostly the Arabic ones. Now, and various different works of other human beings. And then the Rambam writes, accept the truth from the one who says it. This is the source for that famous line. You may have heard that statement before, accept the truth from the one who says it. This is the origin, so far as I know, to that statement. And the Rambam saying is, I just finished telling you that not all the sources are Jewish sources. It's going to come from philosophers, modern philosophers, ancient philosophers, random books of human beings, and therefore you might discard it and say, well, okay, so this philosopher thinks so. Okay, what do I care? Says the Rambam, accept the truth from the one who says it. And therefore, if I'm going to demonstrate the truth of the argument, then who cares where it came from? Accept it. Now, then he continues. There are times when I'm going to direct quote an entire statement or sentence from some book in the original language. Don't discredit there's no negativity in this. Don't discredit what I'm saying because of this. And I'm not going to take credit for things that people said before me. I'm already informing you that not everything's my original. Even though I'm not going to tell you this statement came from so-and-so and this statement came from so-and-so. This is extra lengthy works for no reason. The Efsher, besides the fact that it's just a waste of ink, but in addition, the Efsher maybe Shema Ishahu, someone who doesn't have a tongue, literally, someone who doesn't have the discernment, someone who doesn't have the mental capacity to understand, will discard the words I'm saying if I said it in the name of somebody else. And he'll think that's negative because he doesn't understand it. Now, what exactly he means by these words, there are different commentaries. Here in the English, they write, sometimes too, the mentioning of the name of the authority drawn upon might be one who lacks insight to believe that the statement is quoted is faulty and wrong in itself because he does not understand it. In other words, what he's saying is that if I quote somebody else, the person reading it might think that I don't believe in that statement, and therefore I'm attributing it to somebody else. And if the reader is going to discard it as, oh, Rambam doesn't really believe in this statement, he's just saying it from somebody else because the other guy said it. And therefore the person's not going to take the requisite time to actually study the text. And therefore I'm going to leave it without any names so that you accept the arguments as they are. And then he continues, therefore I've decided not to mention any of the original authors. Because I'm going to stick to my focus, my intention to explain the depth and treasures that are hidden in this tractate. And I'll begin, as I mentioned before, to lay out a number of chapters as an introduction and principles for moral character building that will be described in the Tractate Avos. Shemona Perokim, and they are 8 chapters. And that's where this book gets the name 8 chapters, because it's made up of 8 chapters. It doesn't have any original title from the Rambam because it's part of the Rambam's commentary in the Mishnah. So it doesn't have an original title because it wasn't written as an original independent book. But because of its depth, breadth, and its full 8 chapters and its freestanding nature in that it's in and of itself a wondrous work, it's kind of been dubbed Shemona Perokim, the 8-chapter book. Okay. It's interesting to note, and this is perhaps why the Rambam does this, he elaborates on why he's not quoting the people, why he's not telling you the people he's quoting. And I imagine the reason why he has to go through this labored explanation is because the Mishnah itself says that one who says a statement in the name of the one who originally said it, maybe the Olam brings redemption to the world. Meaning the Mishnah actually praises one who quotes and says where the original quote comes from. But the Rambam says he's not going to do that. So I imagine, therefore, that Rambam had to kind of give a labored explanation to say why he's moving from that principle, even though ordinarily I suppose he would stick to that principle. Okay, so let's get into chapter 1 itself. Chapter 1, know, Nefesh Adam, the soul of man, Nefesh Achas is one soul. V'yesh lepulos rabish chalukas, and it has various different capacities. Now, I translate the word nefesh as soul, and I'm going to keep on translating it as soul, but I want to make the following disclaimer. And I guess to fully understand the disclaimer, we're going to do a little comparative analysis to Chassidus here. When we use the word soul in English, oftentimes we think of a spiritual entity that floats from the heavens and comes into a body. Now, though that's true, but that's not the correct translation of the word nefesh. That would better be reserved for the word neshama. The word nefesh is more your conscious experience of yourself. Your conscious experience of yourself, your sentience. You feel alive, you feel vital. That's a nefesh. And in fact, just to illustrate the point, and this will do a little comparative, right? Because the first thing that I'm said here is that the soul of man is one. There's only one human soul. And you're going to see soon he's going to elaborate on what he means. That there were those who mistakenly thought there's more than one soul, and you should know that there's only one nefesh, there's only one soul. Now, of course, those who learn Tanya know that the Alter Rebbe writes there are two souls. Now there, first of all, when the Alter Rebbe first introduces the idea of two souls in chapter 1, he says, L'chol ish Yisrael, to every Jew, whether he's tzaddik, whether he's beni, whatever kind of Jew he is, yesh shtei neshamas, there are two neshamot, shehein shtei nefashos, which they are two nefashos. So two souls, which are two nefesh. Right, so you see already that the neshama and nefesh are kind of different things, but they become one. And the Rebbe's comment on this little phrase is that the neshama refers to the soul in its state of spiritual existence prior to its investment in the body. And therefore it's a neshama, it's like the soul. That's what we would use the English word soul for this spiritual entity. And then there's the nefesh. Once that soul is invested in the body and I experience it as a conscious human being, that's already a nefesh. Now, as for this issue that the Alter Rebbe writes, there's two nefashos, there's two souls, the godly and the animal, or the godly and the human. Whereas the Rambam writes here, nefesh adam, nefesh achas, there's only one. There's a comment from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the third Chabad Rebbe, in his notes on Tanya, and there he explains that the human soul has various different levels. It has the cognitive, it has the emotional, it has the instinctive, and these are various different levels of what can be generally broadly termed in Tanya as the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul or the human soul. And then the Tzemach Tzedek writes that this human soul, with all of its levels, is the soul referred to by the Rambam in his book Shemona Perokim. So when the Rambam here, when we're reading now, writes that the soul is only one, and he's going to go through in a moment 3 levels, and then he's going to break it down into 5 levels of the soul itself, all of this is referring to the human soul. And therefore, he's going to decidedly, or it seems like almost intentionally, leave out any mention of a godly soul. Now, why that is a good question, and a lot can be said about that. For now, we'll just say this, because as we go along and we discover the Rambam's understanding and developing human character, and we're going to see the contrast of Chassidus, we'll see the idea I'm about to share with you is going to be developed further. But we might say that Chassidus begins where the Rambam here ends. In other words, the Rambam here is going to lay out for us the way in which a person uses the faculties of his human experience to advance his own well-being, his own moral character. The Alter Rebbe's objective is not merely to develop the moral character. A developed moral character is expected of one who shows up to learn Tanya. In other words, the one who's learned Tanya is expected to have already earned some level of moral character. And the Alter Rebbe and Tanya is here to take you to the next level, to the godly, to take your human moral perfected self and make it godly. So therefore that's why I said that perhaps the Alter Rebbe begins where the Rambam ends. Where the Rambam here takes you, the Rambam here, as he says, is talking about ethics of our fathers. He's talking about developing yourself as a human being, and the human soul, as he talks about it here. Nefesh Adam, and as you'll see as we go along, not everything here is exclusive to Jews. It's universal, the layers of the soul as he's going to describe them. And that's, every human being should invest time in developing his moral character as a human being. And then Tanya says, once you've done that, now we're going to take you into the godly realm. And that's already another level up. So I'm going to put like a little pin in that, but I want to make this distinction here at this point that the Rambam is talking about the human experience, and the Alter Rebbe is talking about the godly experience, and they're somewhat different. And as we develop and see the differences in the way that Rambam and the Alter Rebbe talk about developing our souls, we're going to see this idea come further and further into focus. So let's continue. I think we'll just be able to finish this paragraph before Mincha. Okay. So no, Nefesh Adam, that the human soul, the human self-consciousness, Nefesh Achas is only one. We'll just continue calling it soul. But it has various different capacities and abilities. There are those that will sometimes call these capacities souls in and of themselves, because they seem to be doing their own thing. And therefore, and therefore one might make the mistake of thinking that the person has multiple souls, because a soul has so many capacities. Like some doctors have thought. To the point that there's a chief doctor, some distinguished head doctor, who in the introduction to his book, I don't know which doctor he's talking about here, but this doctor writes an introduction to his medicine book that a person has three souls. Tibius, the natural soul, the fact that he can grow and the fact that he feels alive. The fact that he can grow, The chiyunis, the fact that he feels alive, he's sensitive, he can touch, sentience. The nafshius, and his cognitive, his intellectual. So in other words, one can almost think that my intellectual self and the fact that my body grows and the fact that I can sense what's going on in the world around me are three different souls. They don't necessarily have to be one. One could make that mistake, is what I'm saying. And because they seem so different, therefore one might sometimes the mind itself is referred to as a soul. My capacity to grow is referred to as a soul. And the fact that I can touch the world around me is considered a soul. And therefore, mistakenly, one might think a person has three souls. That's not the case. And therefore, so sometimes, because they seem so independent, someone might call them an individual soul. But then there are times that people will call them a part of the soul. And this is something that the philosophers might do many times. And they don't mean, these philosophers don't mean to say, chelke, a part, like parts of a body. Like there's a hand, which is separate from the rest of my body, and like you can, so to speak, separate the hand from the rest of the body. That's not what this means when you say a part of the soul. But they're only listing the various different capacities of the soul, which exist to the general unity of the one soul, like the one thing that's comprised of all these different things. What he's saying is like this, and it's something similar to that which Chassidus says a lot of the time. And one of the proofs that Chassidus says is that a baby doesn't have less of a soul than an adult. Even though a baby doesn't have the cognitive ability of an adult, it still doesn't have less of a soul. Why is that? Because the soul is one. There's one entity, the soul. And it has various different capacities. It has the capacity to make me grow. It has the capacity to make me speak. It has the capacity to make me think, to feel, to touch. And as I grow and as I get older, my body is now more capable of handling more of the soul's potential. And as I grow, as my brain gets better, I extrapolate from my soul more capacity to think. Use a physical example. When I work out and I get stronger, my soul got stronger, my vitality, the fact that I'm alive, my sentience got stronger because I got stronger? No. My sentient self, my sense of being alive was always there. Didn't change, didn't get bigger, didn't get smaller. But as I work out and my body is now stronger, it can now handle more of my life energy that's invested in me. It's one entity, a human soul. And that human soul, as the body develops and as the human being develops, expresses and can manifest more of its capacity, whether intellectual, physical, like physical might or growing, etc. This is a crucial point of the Rambam, as we'll see going forward, because the reason is because one who makes the mistake of thinking that the soul is comprised of different entities might think that there's certain parts of his soul or certain parts of his experience that are out of his control. I can't control that part of me. But when you understand that it's all one human being, it's all one me, and there's just multi-layers of the same human me, my cognitive, my emotional, all of that, then that's the framework with which you can start to work on yourself and better yourself, because it's all one you. And as you grow, you can develop more potentials from the one me. If I thought it was different me's, it would be like, oh, I can't control my emotions. They're off on the side. My intellectual capacity, that I can control. My emotions, I can't control. It's like this other thing. But when you realize it's all one human being, it's all one me, and they interconnect in the ways that he's going to describe in the later chapters, then this is the framework with which we can actually work on changing and developing the characters that we hope to develop over the following chapters. So thank you all for joining us in this kind of experiment first time. To unmute everybody. I think you're unmuted already. Robert,
Yes, Rabbi Levi.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Robert, did you want to ask something? Robert, Carol, you want to ask something? I can't hear you. You got to unmute yourself. I can't hear. Sorry. Can? No, can't hear. Okay, I think Mincha is about now. Have a wonderful evening, and God will continue next Sunday as we develop these ideas further and further.
Thank you. God bless you.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.